All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the RK Leadership Podcast, where we empower tomorrow's leaders through the sharing of knowledge, experience, and inspiring stories. I'm your host, Rob Cameronpour, and today my very special guest is Ajit Dodani. He is the current CEO of Empathify You, and he's the chairman of the board at My Name, My Story, and he's had several past jobs, including being he's been on various boards prior to this, and he was also the CFO of United Colors of Benetton. For those who remember that store in the past. So before I pass it on to you, Ajit, I'd like to say thank you so much for being with me today and doing this podcast and sharing your valuable stories with the audience. Welcome to my podcast.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate the trust. I appreciate the invitation. I appreciate your energy, buddy. I'm here to serve and add any value I could to the amazing work you already do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So why don't we get started? Why don't you tell us about your story and how you got to where you are today? And feel free to share any points that will resonate with our audience today.
Okay, so let's have some fun. So I was born in India. I'm going to kind of link it to the end of the work that I do. I was born in India, moved to the US, first person from my family to move to the US. Um, and within the first I moved here. So let me tell you about a little bit about India. So in India, I was kind of nuts. I was wild, college, I was a model. I did a lot of stuff in fashion,
Nice.
and just kind of crazy world. But I was born an empath, though, Rob. Let's talk about that because that's relevant to the empathy work that I do. I was born an empath. And growing up in a brown household, if as a man, if you felt too much, you were whacked on your head. Men are not supposed to feel, and I got whacked a lot on my head when I was young from the uncles and stuff. Moved to the country, worked like most immigrants, worked really, really hard. Saw the ups and downs of moving to the country. I leave those stories for another day. I actually got jobless and homeless after my first job and stuff on the streets of LA. So just I tell you this because for those who are listening, sometimes you'll meet somebody that's perhaps been a CFO and stuff like that. But you got to remember, our founding stories are as crazy and messy as yours. So
Wow.
been through all the chaos that one would go through, and then worked really hard. Got invited to be part of an amazing team at United Colors of Benetton, and when the West Coast office was opening, I was invited to be the CFO here, and just been an unbelievable journey. That journey was for those of you who know that brand, that the company did incredibly well throughout the world. But in the US, when they came here, we went through an S curve, literally went from 2 stores to literally thousands of stores all over North America. And being the CFO for the West Coast was just a powerful moment for us to watch. Yeah, sure, you have to have financial strategies and organizational strategies. But what really, really I understood was that an empathy strategy of holding people together and
Mm.
having relationship. So the finance hat was about always creating a strategy and some sort of a process around this. And then the empathy side was about learning people. And the CEO at that time, Andrea, who both of us are still friends after 30 plus years, you know, we we did our stuff. And if you remember the story, it was a crazy journey that we went through. We did D&I work when nobody was talking about D&I. It was just natural. We just had like a 25-year reunion at our place for all of us, the 8 of us that started the journey. So it's incredible when you end up doing meaningful work like that. It was purpose driven, it was fun. We were working so hard, um, that we really felt like the work we were doing mattered. It mattered for the community. It mattered for us having fun. Things like joy and fun, which a lot of people have like depleted from our workplace,
Yep.
right? So that was the journey there. And then as Benetton moved out from this country, then my CPA would call me and say, listen, you've had 16 years of unbelievable experience of doing, I have clients for you. And they always knew my special sauce was around culture and people and empathy and connection. And so they'd always introduce me to clients like this. Ajit, great product, worst culture. Now, Rob, this is decade plus ago, right? 10, 15 years ago, and almost 20 years ago sometime. And they couldn't call me an empathy strategist because that was in my head. Because I knew that was, so that time I was a change management consultant. I was a fractional CFO. I would go in there, I would go into companies. And yeah, the idea was financial growth and business growth. But my secret formula was about recognizing the true potential that always stayed in the company.
Mhm.
And the work of Empathify You, I've always been that empathy strategist, but the work got formal under the Empathify You umbrella. And at that point, I just realized that the world needs us to focus on empathy like never before. So the
Mhm.
branding became really clear. The HR community started going to keynotes and say, "Oh, that's the CFO that speaks empathy and KPIs in the same sentence." So that's how I got that brand that you see on my LinkedIn and everywhere. And so here I am in a very passionate place in my life where looking to create a world where everybody feels like they belong. Um, Quick summary of my life. Married, beautifully married to an amazing wife, got two boys,
Nice.
and we live in Los Angeles.
Amazing. So there's a lot packed in there, and I want to kind of take you back to one point that you mentioned. Before I get into the empathy part and the CFO part and the leadership and all that, I want to talk about, the point that you mentioned. You went through the struggles before you landed where you are. So again, Ajit, you know that a lot of people, it's like the iceberg, you know, the
Yep.
picture that you see, a lot of people don't see what's under and they just see the top portion. So if you go back to that point, how are you able to get yourself out of that place? A lot of people struggle and they stay in that place. They don't know how to get out of that zone when they fail, when they're in that bad place. How did you get out of it?
So very early, somewhere along the line, I think my dad used to do something really cool. So when I moved to the States, he would tear out pages from Napoleon Hill, books
Ah,
from people like Napoleon, and he'd tear it and he'd put in the mail for me. So for those of you who are watching this or listening to this, there was something called mail that you mailed. He didn't scan it through a PDF. So anyway, he would mail these things and I would read the stuff. And something that I've kind of embraced and taught over my life is that you you make decisions at the peak, you learn in the valleys,
mm,
right? So it is not if a valley is going to come, it's life. The fit is going to hit the shan. I didn't cuss. You don't need to edit this out. So I still remember that moment. It was, it's very shocking. You move to the country and I'm doing really well. I'm living on Hermosa Beach and all that stuff. And, flying to the Caribbean, making clothes for a brand of clothing designers here and stuff like that. I fly back and the company is gone, Rob. I come back, company gone. I went to the Tanas and the guy standing outside take care of things. And literally I went out at PCH in Hermosa. I have, two bags in my hand and I walk across the street, everything gone. I'm the only person from my family here. And I go into a phone booth and I start to cry. Now, I say this because it is okay to have that moment. Now,
yeah.
here's what I did though, Rob. Crazy as it sounds. In that phone booth, as the sun is hitting, I'm getting hot inside, two bags outside. I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm like, because they didn't pay the money. Like the company went bankrupt overnight. So here's what I did. I took a deep breath. Think about it. I talk about that a lot on LinkedIn and you see it everywhere. I took
Yeah.
a deep breath because somewhere along the line, I was taught that in the middle of chaos, that's how you get present. Just took a deep breath, slowed down. And what I did at that time, Rob, is I asked for help. I called a friend of mine. I said, hey, what are you doing tonight? And he's a good buddy of mine. He's like a party animal, okay? He's the guy that beautiful car, all that stuff, right? I said, what are you doing tonight? He goes, man, Ajit, good to hear from you. What are you doing? I said, I have a little bit of time off. I didn't tell him what was going on. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, I have some time away. So, man, I'm going to Vegas. I said, dude, Can I hitch a ride with you? And now he's in LA. I'm in Hermosa Beach. He actually came down, picked me up. This is a great friend. And then he gets in the car. He says, "Why do you have two bags?" I go, "Dude, I'm done. I don't have a place." And then we go to Vegas and I spend my last few dollars and, think through it and just kind of quiet my mind and say, and I thought through it, called somebody and I asked for help, right? And asking for help sometimes is the bravest thing you can do, right?
Yep.
Sometimes we feel like we're the only one going through these stories. If you listen to the stories of all the amazing people, Rob, you know this, they've all gone through so much.
Yes.
Right now, you have to remember, I was an immigrant, though. I wasn't born and raised here. So, there was a lot of, a lot of chaos around that. But I remember asking for help. And, now watch this. I ended up moving back from LA back to DC and started my life there on the floor of my aunt, who's just been a blessing. And, in our house, they had a small place, but they welcomed me in. I slept on the floor, started there, and then moved from there and all that stuff. But if I hadn't gone back, Rob, I would have never met my wife.
Ah.
See, the dots connect when you look backwards, right? Steve Jobs 101, the dots will connect looking backwards. So I say this, that when you're in the moment, learn the skills. Like, I remember, observing and understanding the power of breath really early in my life, right? Understand the power of presence. The worst thing you can do is when you're in the valley to make a decision. And if you're not really present and self-aware, that you're in a bad moment and you're making a decision, you'll regret that decision. So I know that's a long answer to your question, but I wanted to answer that in a way that I gave a tool that self-awareness becomes probably the most important thing.
Absolutely.
And not realizing, if you hear enough stories, and that's where, listening to podcasts like, ones that Rob had, listening to stories of other entrepreneurs, you'll realize that everybody has a similar story. People who tell you that they had a straight line growth, they're lying. That's it.
So. So that's amazing. I love how you said you make decisions at the peak and you learn in the valley. It's so important. And I'm learning as we speak from you. And like you said, Ajit, you're absolutely right. Everyone, including myself, the people that you talk to, everyone's gone through something.
Yeah.
And you either learn something from those, from those times where we call failures, or you stay in them for a while.
Yeah.
Right. So
no, well said.
And I greatly appreciate you sharing that story with me. It's amazing. So let's get on to some happier stuff. So you talked about this, and I have it written down here, so I was going to bring it up. A CFO who speaks empathy and KPIs in the same sentence. Why is this unique?
So typically finance folks are not, empathy is not a word that is used in financial, because it's the reality, right?
Correct.
You think about spaces like engineering, classic, where efficiency was the model, right? Regardless of what school you and I went to, we were never taught the framework of empathy. Now, the research is clear that we should have been taught that, right? But we were being prepared for an industrial model. So think about it for a second, right? So efficiency has always stayed the benchmark of success. Let's look at some very classic efficiency: engineering, software, finance, law, right?
Yeah.
All of these fields was always about the most efficient person becomes the manager. That's the worst mistake that people ever did. When you base raises based on efficiency and length of employment in a company.
Yes.
You know this.
Yes.
Right? So the CFO that speaks empathy, the reason why I think it caught on over there is because to this day, I mean, you've seen this, I show up on SHRM in different places and I'm invited to connect the dots for people. because most people, I've been talking about empathy forever, right? We've run it through school systems with our sister organization, Minding My Story, and all that stuff. So we've been always talking about empathy. Empathy is not a word of the day for me. It's my life's purpose, the work that I've done. I mean, so the reason why this is important is this. It's kind of interesting. We've always talked about empathy, and then, you know how it is when you talk about empathy and you show up on a board and you're talking to a board, and say we're talking about Empathify You, and I get a chance to talk to a board of 12 people. 2 people love me because deep inside they understand what the power is. 2 people don't like me at all. They're like, what's this thing? Yeah. And the rest of them are in the middle going, I've never been taught about this. How can empathy be a strategy for success, right? So when you link empathy, and empathy strategy is a journey of self-awareness, stakeholder understanding, and strategic action. So 3 things. The framework that we teach is self-awareness. Why do you make the decisions you do? Stakeholder understanding. Why is that important? And what is the strategic action you're taking towards a bigger goal than you? So when you link, for example, I'm very passionate about neurodiversity at work, right? I'm sure you've seen my stuff around. I'm very passionate about it because let's talk about this for a second. In 2019, 3.5% of the population was navigating PTSD symptoms. Between 2019 and 2024, that number has gone up to 26% of us.
Wow.
Rob, 26% of us are now navigating PTSD because of what's happened in the last 4 years. I don't need to repeat what's happened. And the continuous bombardment of leading through chaos, right?
Right.
The volatility, the hybrid, the political polarization, you can just go around everything. And so that whole impact of that, most people have not sought help. Less than 3% have sought help. Now, why do I talk about this with you, Rob? Why is that important? Because guess what? That means our customers have changed. That means 1 out of 4 of our customers are navigating that. So, and then under the neurodiversity umbrella is autism and all the other work, right, around neurodiversity. So if 1 out of 4 of us are neurodiverse, shouldn't our companies be neuro-inclusive at work and understand our customers better? We worked with a large global organization recently, and we've been teaching this framework around neuro-inclusion at work because of this huge rise. Now, Rob, you're like, Ajit, how can you talk about it? You're not a doctor, you're not a scientist. Rob, I want to let you know that 12 years ago, I was diagnosed with PTSD. I'm going to leave the incident out, but I was a senior leader. An incident happened in my life, and I saw this neural pathway of mine completely change. There was so much shame, guilt, and I changed my behavior all of a sudden after that incident. A few days later, the doctor said, this is where you're at. Now watch this, Rob. I grew through it, through a framework, growing after trauma, then understanding. And PTSD, by the way, is under the neurodiversity umbrella, because your brain neural pathway changes, what you need changes. And I changed my behavior, Rob, at that point.
That's right.
I wanted different things from my work. So if you met me on that Monday, the event happened on a Tuesday, you met me a week later, you're like, what's wrong with Ajit? He's acting weird. What's he doing? What's he doing? To this day, Rob, it's 13 years now, 12 years. I have to get up in the morning and spend an hour and 15 minutes taking care of myself.
Wow.
If I don't do it, I mean, not in a day you won't, but if I don't do it for 2 days, you'll know I'm not taking care of myself. Luckily, I'm a big proponent of those that need meds should get meds and all. Luckily, I didn't need to do that. So I owe that growing through that and learning about how people navigate PTSD, reading Dr. Tedeschi's books and all these different books. I started learning about how you navigate and lead after you've gone through a traumatic event. Now, I casually started talking about it, Rob, in different leadership environments, and people are like, me too, Ajit. Can you call me on this? Me too. This is going on for a while. I'm like, what's going on? And then started casually leading people through this. And that time there was no big awareness around PTSD and neuro inclusion and stuff like that. But last year I spoke to over 10,000 people about this. Why? Because I'm a CFO talking about neuroinclusion.
Amazing.
Sure, I have the right people on my team from around the world, and we bring the best research, and I go to all the best conferences to get very relevant information. But Rob, the idea is that this is how I can take empathy and link it to KPIs. That yes, you need to care.
Yes.
You need to care for them, not because it's just a human thing to do, it's a business thing to do.
Yes.
In the process of chasing that business profitability and understanding your customers better, you'll make more money, but you'll become better humans. Your meetings will be better off. I have stories after stories where people, and we are blessed, we work with large institutional and small 20 people organizations to 110,000 people organization. And we get a chance to bring this message to them. And on the side, you'd have so many people saying, me too, I need this. Oh God, I needed to hear this. And because it's framed in the way we frame our framework is very around business, right? So imagine they're coming to your CFO, talk about an empathy strategy and growth and business mindset. So all of a sudden, they're not coming here. They come there and suddenly I'm bringing up topics that link to their business outcomes, but they're based on empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Does that kind of make sense, Rob? This will be one example of where my life is taking me.
Amazing. That's awesome. So again, I got a lot of questions for you around this. And this is why I said we can kind of stay on this topic for a while. So one of the questions I have for you, and I'm sure a lot of people would want to hear this, is again, when you're developing KPIs, how do you tie to empathy? And give me an example of a KPI that reflects empathy.
Clear. So our manager effectiveness scores in organizations suck. Our engagement scores suck. Okay, watch this. So let's look at engagement scores. So in a best case scenario, you could have engagement scores of 60%. You and I know the recent numbers are coming down. They're like 70% of people are disengaged or not, but let's take the best case. 60% of your workforce is engaged. So Mr. CEO, you run a multi-million-dollar company, and let's take easy numbers. So you have a $10 million spend or investment in people in your company. Wow, that's fantastic, Mr. CEO. So according to your numbers, only 60% are engaged. So you have only 60% engagement. So that means your system was only getting me a return on 6 million, but I'm giving you $10 million to spend. Okay. So you, Mr. CEO, we need to talk a little bit. Oh, it's their problem. No. If we have to find a way to fix that. Now, the other one that we're notoriously famous for, if you look up our reputation in the space around people development, manager effectiveness. Rob, before 2019, efficiency, just like we talked about earlier, efficiency. Gartner put 3 words out. In order to lead today, you have to be adaptive, empathic, and your leadership style has to be individualized. What does that mean, Rob? If I'm a manager and I have 6 people on my team, those 6 people are 6 different people.
Yes.
With 6 different needs, with 6 different goals. Some of them want to come there and feel good. Some of them, it's very transactional. Some of them want to, and you have to learn to lead them, all 6 of them, the same way. Yes. I can tell you, I've been in rooms, 2015, 2016, where a leader goes, this is my style of leadership. You either learn about it or I've been in rooms where people have said that. I'm going, you're never going to get the best out of your people, right? If you, and it's now the science is showing it. So managers, unfortunately, most managers, not most, a lot of managers, not most, because some managers are killing it as far as product, getting a great work product out, as well as leading people well. But there are a lot of people that should not be managers. They should not be people leaders. They should be subject matter experts on the side, just giving advice to your company or your leaders, but they should never be allowed to interact with another human being because they have no skill set.
I love it.
So that is the dollars, and I can go on around this engagement scores, but those are the two that I always look at. I go in there and I start with manager effective. And if I see those numbers so low, I'm like, oh, so let's look at that. So are you tracking your innovation in your organization and what's coming through your company? Because I'm very clear, I want that tracked, right? Most people don't know how to do it. And we have a very specific, because we do from surveys to understanding. And let's start tracking this. So we've been tracking this for an organization. So started 3 years ago. Innovations from their organizations were from their people, because there's such a low trust in their organization, 30%. 3 years later, 62%. That means for so many years, there was this big gap. People had ideas, but they didn't speak up because those managers were struggling.
That's right.
I'm calling a manager in right now. If you're a people leader and you have to learn these skills, this is about being smart. This is about being efficient. It's about creating a better work product, right? It's and we can talk about all this stuff as much as you want. Anyways,
I love it. Now, you're speaking my language, because one of my biggest things is engagement. I talk about it all the time, Ajit, and I don't think people really understand how important engagement is and the impact it has on the bottom line. So you talked about, yes, a company can be making money. Fantastic. Imagine if you had a high engagement score and people were actually engaged, how much more you would be making.
Yeah.
And I don't think people can wrap their head around that.
Let me give you an example. I'll give you a great example. I'll tell you a story of the worst leader that I observed for a while. That worst leader was me. Now, let me tell you, I was a young CFO, leader of an organization, accounting team, and all that stuff. And most of people have this, one of these things that they have is this thing called control and recognition. We call in our world, a lot of people say, oh, values drive you. No, values don't lead the company. It's your shadow values that determine your actions. So my stated value was innovation in my team, but my shadow value was control and recognition. What does that mean? I was the jerk. So I would say, hey, innovation. But when they give me ideas, I would never tell my senior leader that this person gave I wanted to control everything going on. I'd never give them recognition. And guess what? Their contribution shrunk. And then the lucky thing was I was a journaler and I watched that happen. And I said, oh my God, I am the jerk here. So I talk about this everywhere I go. And one of the biggest jerks I've known as a leader is myself, because I've been there when I did not do the right thing. And guess how many managers navigate this? A lot.
Yeah. So how were you able to change that, Ajit? This is where a lot of managers struggle.
Self-awareness, coaching, self-awareness. And self-awareness, like I told you, an empathy strategy, self-awareness, understanding who you are, what are things holding you back, and what is not. Obviously, it's easy to list what gets you to succeed, but what are you doing that's messing things up? Self-awareness. Are you really, for example, one of the things that we spend a lot of time is just being present.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Most managers today, like, oh, I'm going from meeting to meeting to meeting. Sorry, you don't get any flowers, or most people you don't get any if you're not present. Amishi Jha wrote a book, Peak Mind, right now, and she's talking about this. Most people are showing up into a meeting, their head, because of the chaos going on in the world and their lives and the political chaos, their heads are not in the meeting. And if you as a leader are not starting the meeting with intention, with getting everybody present, it's not a woo-woo thing. It's I want that 25 minutes, by the way. Most of my clients today have 25 minutes and 50 minutes meeting. Nobody has an hour meeting. Why? We give that 5-minute gap between meetings. Now, what do you do with that? You reset. You got to make sure you reset. You get present. You take care of yourself, and you get everybody else to present. And that's a great example of how people are using the same old. My CEOs that I coach and senior leaders that I coach, it's that the worst thing you can do is walk into a meeting and say, oh my God, what a crazy day. I've been going from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. What I do is I go in and I work, listen to them, and I'm going, dude, when you tell me that, and I'm one of your employees, I'm like, oh shit, this guy's too busy. Oh, sorry, guys. You can edit that, but
That's
whatever.
okay.
It's okay. That word can be left in there. But
Yeah.
anyway, so the employees tone it down. They're like, oh, this is not a good time to bring him. He's very busy. Versus me showing up in a meeting saying, hey, just want to let you know, guys, this next 25 minutes, I'm with you guys. I am so excited and present and going to be here. While we do this, let's take a quick breath together so we all get present. And let's kind of get this meeting started, right? Why don't we do that? Why don't we get up, everybody, just shake it all out. And I just want everybody 25 minutes of your time. Let's stay focused and we're going to get this done. How different is that than starting a meeting with, I'm going from meeting to meetings?
It's weird. That's what people are going to think you're like. It's weird because they're not accustomed to this. They're accustomed to this, like you said, the control, the micromanagement and all that stuff. So again, I'm going to ask you a question that I've asked a lot of people on my podcast. We talk about empathy. We know how important it is, as you mentioned it. Now, the $1 million question is, we can coach leadership, we can coach all this other stuff. How do you teach somebody empathy?
It's a skill. It's a very tactical skill, and you can research it. It's a very tactical skill. That's why that formula, self-awareness, stakeholder understanding, and strategic action is a very clear formula. On a napkin on Melrose Avenue years ago, I wrote a formula for trust. Things that normally, so that's where my finance hat comes on for you. Things that normally were ambiguous or like, people, no, I can teach you empathy. I can teach you trust. That's why it's called an empathy strategy. And people are like, Ajit, you're branding. I say, yes, it's a strategy. It's about, my dad says, so you get paid for people to just teach them how to be good people? I go, yeah, true. But I get them to be efficient, get them to be smart. But yes, Rob, it's a very teachable skill. It's
Perfect.
not an innate. Like being an empath is something that you're born with. But learning empathy to impact your business outcomes so you have a high performance team. Like if you have a high performance, most everybody's like high performance culture without a very strategic empathy strategy sucks. Yeah. I'm going to put it straight up. I don't know. I'm sure you're seeing this. We're just seeing the reports come out. Everybody going high performance culture, because they were done. Like they overdid. So people were not used to this empathy for years. When everything happened around COVID and the social political movements and stuff like that, they over-indexed. No, we care too much. I go, dude, just be normal. I mean, I just want to let you know, Rob, you can have too much empathy. I think some of your listeners are going to be glad to hear that. Yeah. You can have too much empathy. Empathy has to be balanced to it. 4 pillars, and we teach it. High accountability, great communications skills, great relationships, and a high level of skill set. If you have great empathy, but you don't have a good skill set, I'm firing you. You're like, come on. I say, yeah, I'm going to give you a chance to develop. But the idea is an empathy strategy is about all of these circles, right? So when we build a strong high-performance culture, we're notoriously famous for moving the index, giving common language around that. It's a very teachable skill. It's a skill. Now, there are those that don't want to learn it. We did a survey recently, like, we didn't. So one of our clients did a survey saying, hey, we're offering these classes. How many of you want to take a class in some Excel, AI, all that stuff? And how many of you guys want to do a class around an empathy strategy so we understand our customers better? And so they had 40% of the employees preferred the empathy, but 60% wanted the technical class on how to use the technology. So I told the HR lead, I said, can you do me a favor? Can you pick up the phone and call some of the folks that said they'd rather do that as to why? She called about 25 random people. All of them said that empathy thing, man, is going to take more courage. It's the right thing for us to learn, but it's going to take more courage. I'd rather just stay focused on my dashboard. Guess what they went with as an organization? Empathy. And guess what? Years later now, they're like S-curve. In dollars and cents, they've gone from a high 7 figures, 8 figures to a steady 8-figure income now in that division, because it landed because you got to teach them the right thing.
That's
Because
right.
the science is real. Let's see. Ernst and Young put out their research on empathy. Organizations that embrace empathy have 85% more revenues.
So true. So true.
That's it. I think.
And there's a stat to back it up. There's your research, right? So would you agree with me, Ajit, to say that, and this is what I always say to people, is you got to be able to lead yourself before you lead other people. And that comes with the self-awareness. Because if you're not aware of yourself, how can you be aware of other people and what they're going through and what they're, how to even communicate with them?
100%. 100%. That's why our journey starts with that. Like we increased manager effectiveness scores for an organization 25 points in over 6 months. Unusual for us, Rob, even for us, because generally it's 18 points over a year. This one, everybody was bought in, and the managers were sick and tired of stuff that was not working. The biggest portion that we spend time in our stuff is around that self-awareness.
Nice.
Because then guess what? If I can get you to be self-aware, you can model everything you want your team to do.
Yes.
Most leaders suck at modeling. My LinkedIn presence, I model hard work. If you follow me, I'm all over the place, hustling, working hard, working with my team across the world and all that stuff. But at the same time, you'll see me have fun. You'll see me exercise, right? You'll see me take care of myself because I want people to know that you don't have to burn yourself out. This is not an archaic system of growth. So that's why you're 100% right, Rob. 100% right.
So I'm going to tell you or ask you another question where I hear this from a lot of people as well. When you tie in empathy and kindness together, they say you can't be kind to people because they'll take advantage of you. And again, my thing is you can be kind, but you need to set boundaries. So what's your take around, being kind and not, people not taking advantage of you on the team? What do you need to do?
Kindness and empathy are two different words.
Yes.
But I completely agree with you. Even with empathy, when I told you, you can have too much empathy if you don't have accountability. The first thing in accountability is boundaries.
Yes.
Right? So my answer to that is boundaries. And there are two different words. You can be kind. Empathy is something completely different. And the way we teach it at Empathify You as a tactical strategy of becoming a high performance individual, that one has a level of commitment to understanding for a vision that's bigger than anything else, right? So let's talk about the elephant in the room. There's this pushback around D&I and inclusion and all that stuff. I have a simple question because I'm working with large organizations that have taken our framework, and we've been teaching this as belonging and empathy for decades. So think about how this whole work around D&I, affirmative action, D&I, all that stuff, right? So here's what it is. If your brand and who you are as a company and your product can feel like people feel like they belong, they see themselves in your product.
Yeah.
They see you take the effort to get to know the community. They will just support you more. Let's look at this, right? The Hispanic market is the biggest market right now when it comes to buying power. One of the biggest communities, buying power, fast growing. And recently working with a company, and they're like looking to grow, and they're stuck, right? They're doing well, but they're stuck. They're not growing. I'm like, growing, right? So yeah, we're looking to target and these different markets and all that stuff. I said, who do you have from that market represented in your teams? 1% there and 1% there. And I said, wait, do they have a voice at the table? Do you have a trusting organization that they can speak up and tell you how to really approach and talk to that community? Now, every time we've bought in more stakeholders, created trust. We have a formula for trust at Empathify. When we create that trust where people can give the ideas,
Yeah.
and they're allowed to fail. Most people suck at developing organizations that allow failure.
Yes.
They do. So, but when you create an organization that has these, imagine you have all the people represented regardless of where they come from, and you're very deliberate. Like the reason why I talk about neurodiversity in the last 4 years, it is huge. That never in our workplace has it gone from 3.5 to 26% of our market changing, right? So if you don't have somebody that is neurodiverse, or if you don't have an ERG that specifically advocates for neuroinclusion, or you don't have somebody that really understands that new market that you're trying to tap into, and you don't have people stakeholders, and you think you can understand their need, not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. So you nailed it. I think there's so much, and again, the D&I that you speak about, all that stuff, it is about like the belonging. People want to feel belonged in that organization where they work, where they go every day, and it's creating that safe environment for them to be able to speak up, to be able to thrive. That's what it really is about, right? And you can call it whatever you want to call it, but that sense of belonging will help people stay engaged in their work as well.
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that, Ajit. So one of the things I wanted to ask you is, again, for a lot of, the young professionals listening to this podcast, is you spent 20 years in the C-suite. What were the top 3 lessons that you learned that you'd like to share with the young leaders out there?
I can tell you the one most important thing. And I today do keynotes about it. I was a brown person born in India, moved to the US. And for a moment, I was dialing myself down. I was covering portions of my identity, who I was. I remember going to my first conference and everybody was one color except for me. And they'd look at me and talk to me like almost I'm a species and like going, ooh, interesting. Wow, that's right. So I tell you, here's my tip for anybody who's listening to this. Listen to this really carefully. For anybody listening to this, I want you to dial it up. I want you to be your most authentic, most powerful you. I don't want to give you anything technical. I want you to dial it up. Be yourself. Wear your story on your sleeve. The world needs that right now. When we spend time in covering portions of identity, we're losing up here. Like I remember going into meetings where I'm like, what should I say? How should I dress? And as you know me, Rob, I'm a pretty loud guy. I dress a certain way. I talk a certain way. I'm very energetic.
Yes.
But if I'm trying to fit into a bunch of CFOs that all speak in a square language, I went, that works for them, but maybe there's a way that I could fit in with my personality, with my traditions, with my beliefs. And guess what? When you dial it up, when you show up as your most authentic you, that's what the world needs right now. Because when you bring in your flavor, we can understand a little bit more about where you come from, your story, your background.
That's right.
And we want our markets are not just a little, 200 feet around us. Today, our markets are global.
Yeah.
Think about people over here buying products in India and people in China buying products and we're buying products from UK. And it's so transparent.
That's right.
So my biggest tip I can tell you is just be yourself. Skill up. I'm going to tell you, communication, build great relationships, be accountable, skill up. But man, get that confidence and self-awareness to be the loudest, boldest self that you are. Obviously, and that really helps you win, right? Always respectful, always understanding. Listen to a lot of stories. That's the other tip I would say on. Listen to a lot of stories of people that are not like you. Because, you may be raised in a community or a culture that you were maybe never exposed to a certain religion, maybe never exposed to a certain sexual identity. Listen to stories, get to know these, because when you hear those stories, because stories inspire empathy and empathy drives change. Listen to the stories. There's so many podcasts, like Rob's doing these podcasts. There are so many podcasts where you can listen to stories of unbelievable people that are different than you.
That's right.
I want you to know that on a regular basis, I listen to people that are completely opposite of me. I go and I actually listen to them so I can understand how their brain works. So that's my challenge to you. Dial it up and listen to a lot of stories.
Amazing. I love it. I'll definitely be using this stuff. So, Ajit, how urgent is empathy required in the workplace in 2024?
It's the catalyst. Gary V. It's the catalyst. It's the catalyst. And the reason why the people that get it, oh my God, Rob, we're blessed. Today we have a roster of clients that you would go, oh my God, this traditional company that's 200 years old with a bunch of folks that are super like command and control type are embracing empathy, because guess what? They realize, and I'll tell you this story, right? A lot of people ask me, why do you do this work? And maybe this can answer your question. And I have, quote unquote, the uncles in everybody older in our community is called uncle, right? Go, son, you were CFO, you could do this empathy work. Why do you do this? And I tell them, uncle, I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for your grandkids. They look at me strangely. So because your grandkids are on a mental health spectrum, on a sexual spectrum, on a social spectrum, on a political spectrum, and they are navigating their life, and they'll probably microdose on something by the time they're 18. They're probably going to show up at work. Some of them are going to show up with a nice crisp haircut. Some of them are going to show up half blue and half pink hair. I'm creating a world where regardless of where they're on any spectrum, that they feel like they belong.
That's right.
Now that, Rob, even those conservative uncles that don't understand empathy, they get because they realize that this generation is different.
That's right.
And if we as leaders don't create a place where they feel like they belong, then it becomes transactional. But if they feel like they belong, and I just want to let you, anybody who's doing the deism around generation, the only reason they're doing it because they don't understand how to create a workplace where people feel like they belong. The brightest, I get to coach and work with very young entrepreneurs, 25, 20, that have got a lot of money coming their way and building young organizations. People feel like they belong. When they feel like they belong, they're the hardest working. People say, oh, this generation doesn't work. You don't get it. If you help them feel like you belong, you don't have to be perfect. You could, I have to learn. Maybe you don't understand pronouns. Maybe you have to learn. They don't care for you to get perfect, but they want to see that intention. That are you there to help them feel like they're included? Or are you dismissive saying, oh, in our times, we didn't do this, so we're not going to do this. And I say this because this deism drives me nuts. They're lazy. That exists in leaders that are not self-aware. And if you're a people leader, I would tell you, just kind of understand that it all lands on you. If you take ownership of the team. Anyways, Rob.
No, it's absolutely. You're accountable for your people. And, we're dealing with a different generation, different times. With social media and everything, you put it in the mix. This is what you get. Now you have to learn how to lead people. They're people. You're leading human beings, and we're all emotional beings, as you know it. So you just gotta work around to understand the different people, like you said.
Huge. I just put a post out. Last year, I'd done a workshop around working around multi-generational teams for an engineering organization. And a year later, this leader has been struggling, trying to figure it out. And literally, he said, because of this, I'm back to having fun. I don't dread Mondays.
Yes.
I have the energy back because I realized that I could change. And then now that same person who first said this generation is lazy or this and that, it's like, oh my God, they're the hardest working folks and the most brilliant folks. I wasn't ready to lead them. So hope that helps.
Beautiful. So we've come to the almost end of our podcast, Ajit. So We're at the segment where I like to call rapid fire questions,
Oh,
asking you some questions. So the first thing that comes in your mind, just fire away and we'll go right through these questions and we'll take it from here. Are you ready to go?
I am ready. I don't know where this is going to go. So let's go.
Awesome. All right. So what is the toughest emotion to control as a leader?
Fear. Most people operate out of fear, and that's a very difficult emotion to cover or
Beautiful.
to control. Fear. A lot of decisions are made out of fear, and unfortunately, as you know, Rob, doesn't go in the right direction.
That's right. What is your unconventional definition of leadership?
I don't say it's unconventional. It's how we define leadership, right? Leadership is about creating an environment where again goes back to the definition of what we do, right? I know who I am. I take time to understand who you are.
Mhm.
And we can sit on the same table, bring our whole selves to solve any problem that comes our way. Right. So if that's the definition of what we do at Empathify You, is that I know who I am, I take time and I understand who you are. We respectfully sit on the same table, bringing our whole selves to solve any problem that comes our way. That for me is the highest form of leadership. If you can lead where that can happen, you won.
Amazing. What is the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Breathe.
Hmm. What is the one word that describes Ajit best?
You know, the natural instinct is you need a word or a sentence.
A word.
I would go, obviously, empathy is the logical word, right? I think at this point, let's leave it at that. Let's leave it at empathy.
Beautiful.
I have a higher word, but I that context might go into a different conversation.
We'll leave that one for the next podcast, Ajit.
Yes.
Awesome. And lastly, where can people find you?
LinkedIn, just connect with me on LinkedIn. That's where I live, and Empathify You and all that stuff. You know how to look me up. Pretty easy. I'm sure Rob's going to have notes on. But I think the way you can find me is what I'd love to see happen is I want you to be present. If I can leave with this, Rob, is the way you can find me is if you can be present for yourself, your partner, your kids, your community.
Nice.
If you can be present, and if my presence around you gets you to be more present, that's how you found me. You found me. If you've heard this podcast and you've come to this point, that's how I want you to find me within your.
Awesome. I love that. Listen, I learned so much from you today. I really enjoyed our conversation. I greatly thank you, and I'm very grateful for your time this evening and spending time with you and you sharing your wonderful stories and your experience with the folks out there. Thank you so much. For all those listening, if you've got any questions for Ajit, again, drop it in the box below. I'll make sure I get it to him and I'll put his LinkedIn address and everything in there as well. Thank you all for joining us tonight. And I hope you took something away. And for those who are new, follow, subscribe to this channel, and we'll see you on the next podcast. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everybody.